reading the book of Nehemiah, God called him to do this amazing work, but it came with so much oppression and opposition. I mean, people were trying to stop him from doing the work that God called him to do, and he just stayed so focused and didn't listen to the naysayers. And at one part in the Bible where it says they have a trowel in one hand and a sword in another hand to defend themselves while they were rebuilding that wall. And I know right now the work that you guys are doing is under attack. History's under attack. Why do you think people on the left, because it seems that's where it is. I mean, that's speaking truth. That's where it comes from. Why is people on the left so aggressively trying to remove history, from our culture?
Yeah, I think there's an ideology. At this point, we're seeing an underlying Marxist ideology, but I think we can track it back for several decades. If you go back to even the 1970s, 1980s, there were attacks on the founding fathers saying that they were immoral men, that they were adulterers, they were philanderers. If you go into the 90s, we heard that they weren't religious men, they were atheists, agnostics, and deists. If you come to the early 2000s, we hear that they're slave owners and they're racist and they're bigots. And what's interesting is that for the last many decades, there have been attacks on the founding fathers. And I think the reason there's been attacks on the founding fathers is because you can't ultimately change America as a nation, as a structure, unless you first can villainize the founding fathers. Because if you can point out the founding fathers were really bad guys, then you can make the argument that the documents they gave us, like the Constitution, that's really bad because it came from really bad guys. And so because they're bad, the Constitution's bad, we need to get rid of this. And this is part of this Marxist push we're seeing in America today. And one of the reasons that we're having so much opposition is because we're actually showing the true story of America. And the true story of America is so different than what a lot of the arguments has been, than what a lot of professors have been saying. It's so different than what they're saying. And because we're showing the original documents and it tells a different narrative, we're familiar with today with this notion of cancel culture. And we've seen cancel culture happening around us. And especially a lot of times as people that come from a Christian or conservative circle, we've seen even government agencies targeting some Christian and conservative groups, trying to cancel them. This is something that we've seen for a long time. And now, as we're trying to fight this battle for communicating the truth about American history, it's no different. And so let me just, Chad, as we get going, I want to show something real quick if I can. We actually have a copy of the original draft of Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence. And what's significant about this, when Jefferson died in 1826, his writings were collected. And when his writings came out in 1828, one of the things in his writings was his original draft of the Declaration. That was so impressive when it came out that here's his actual handwritten draft. They went and did what was kind of like an ink lift of that draft, where they made a copy of it. They put a piece of paper, a document on it. They kind of put some chemicals, some liquid on it, and they lift actually ink off to make a duplicate. They took that duplicate, and this is the copy they made from that duplicate. So there actually were many copies made, but this is one of the copies, and it's 4 pages. What's significant about this is Jefferson's original draft of the Declaration. And in this draft, it actually, over on the side, you can actually see that there are some things that are crossed out. But where things are crossed out over on the side, it actually has the name of the person who edited that document. So up here, it says Dr. Franklin. Right here, it says Mr. Adams. Well, Benjamin Franklin and John Adams were both on that committee with Jefferson to draft the Declaration. So literally, this is the actual handwritten document with the actual edits from the guys who were there. What's interesting about it is when you get to the 3rd page, when Jefferson drafts the Declaration, as he's going through, he's explaining why we need to separate from the king. And as he goes through the grievances, when he gets to the grievances down here, it's upside down. When he gets to the grievances on this 3rd page, the longest grievance he gives is a grievance against slavery, specifically in America. He says that the king has brought these people against their wishes from Africa to America. And he says, we in America have actually tried to stop this, and we actually have passed laws to stop this, and the king has vetoed all those laws. What's interesting is not only is there an anti-slavery grievance in the original draft of the Declaration, one of the things he says, and I'm going to read part of it, in this draft, he says, the King of Great Britain has determined to keep open a market where men should be bought and sold. And the men, if you can see it, and actually you can get online, you can look this up, go look at Jefferson's original draft, find this image, but the men is all caps. It's capital M, capital E, capital N. The reason this matters, Jefferson is talking about the slave market. He says the King of Great Britain is determined to keep open a market where men are sold into slavery. Well, the men he's talking about are these Africans. Now, the reason this matters is one of the narratives we hear right now is not only were the founding fathers racist, right? We have the 1619 Project, which says America was built on slavery and everything about America is racism and slavery. I would point out, in the original draft of the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson said slavery was one of the great evils in America that we had actually tried legislatively to end, and the king had enslaved these men. Well, the men also becomes important because in the Declaration it said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal." Some people say today, well, but Jefferson only meant the white men. No, he did not. Go back and read his original draft. He actually clearly clarified the men he was talking about were actually these African slaves coming to, these were men who were being bought and sold. The reason, again, this matters. When this original draft was presented before the Congress and they're debating on what's going to happen, John Hancock said they could only include in the Declaration what was unanimously agreed upon. And so they begin debating what was unanimous. And John Hancock, he made a really good point in this. He said this has to be unanimous because if it's not unanimous, the king can come in and he can pick us apart by our own interests. So we have to all be unified. Well, as they're reading through the Declaration, it came to the anti-slavery grievance. And as they read this, there were two states who said, we don't think that needs to be included because we personally in our colonies, we haven't tried to end slavery yet. The two colonies were Georgia and South Carolina. They opposed the anti-slavery grievance in the Declaration, so it was removed. But what's more important is 11 of the 13 colonies agreed with it. 11 of the 13 original colonies of America came out as being against slavery in America. Today, people have no idea that the original Declaration had an anti-slavery grievance or that the longest grievance was anti-slavery, that many of the founding fathers were, in fact, anti-slavery. And the reason I bring this up, even showing original documents, is because we're able to go back and actually tell more of the real story of America that today people have no idea about. But today, if you offer the suggestion that America was not a fundamentally racist nation, that America actually was doing more to fight against slavery than any other nation in the world at that time, today people would think like you're a heretic, right? Like you're crazy. That's so ridiculous. They don't believe that because they've never seen it before, but they've never seen it because they've never actually studied the original documents. We have the original documents and we can present this truth from this history that people have never seen, or in many cases have never seen. Maybe some people have seen it, but it's not taught, it's not talked about very often. And this is why we get a lot of attacks, is because people, this is just new for them, and it's so against the modern narrative that there are people that they don't care about the truth, they care about their side winning, right? The Marxists don't care about what's true. The Marxists care about overthrowing the Constitution of the United States of America. And so if we're going to suggest that a lot of what they're saying is lies, and therefore we shouldn't overthrow the Constitution, they will attack us for saying things they think aren't true, even though we have the actual documents. So this is part of the reason we get some of these attacks. It's not because we make up history. It's because people just have never seen these documents before, and they don't know what to do with that truth.
The truth is being hidden. What? Just real quick, what's the percentage of that America participated in the slave trade during that time?
So real quickly, in the slave trade, there were 12.7 million slaves that came out of Africa. Approximately 380,000 came to America. But if you look percentage, now, by the way, if you look at all of North America, it was roughly 3% of the slaves that came out of Africa came to North America. But not all of those that came to North America even came to American colonies, because some went to French colonies, some went to Dutch colonies, some went to Spanish colonies, because at that point in North America, you had multiple nations that had colonies in North America. So not even all the slaves that came to North America came to the actual American colonies, but it was less than 3% of the slaves that came out of Africa even came to North America, much less than the American colonies. So even this notion, right, that last year you had Democrat Senator Tim Kaine that said America didn't inherit slavery, we created slavery. We did not create slavery. We did not create the slave trade, and we weren't even a leader in the global slave trade. Instead, America was the very first nation in the world to pass a law banning the slave trade. We did that law on March 2nd, 1807. Thomas Jefferson signed that law. We were the first nation in the world to pass a law banning the slave trade. Nobody else had ever done that. So America, even though it's true, we did participate in the evil of slavery, America led the world in fighting against that great evil. And we were one of the first nations not only to fight the slave trade, we were one of the first nations to actually end slavery in the entire world.